This would be beneficial for the show until one person, this one he was never supposed to be there. He slipped in the crack somehow. And he somehow got in there. This is America. Like, I like to believe that's how they had to carry out CM Punk. He was just being handcuffed with his pants around his ankles. This is America. This is America. What is this, communist country?
This is for what? Arresting me for what? I'm not allowed to stand up for myself? I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America? I'm sorry. I thought this was America.
So at the Brawl Out, Tony Khan would announce that the Trios champions, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, have all been suspended and stripped of their championships. Tony would then announce that World Championship was also vacated, but would weirdly not name CM Punk. This would go on to be a theme going forward for AEW, as they would proceed to give him the WWE treatment, for lack of a better word, by acting as if he never existed. Going as far as to place furniture over pictures of him backstage so his face couldn't be seen on television, removing him from promotional material, and even removing him as the head of the video game cover and replacing him with, all people, Kenny Omega. Hey, future Mike, make sure you hit that like button so, it really helps in the algorithm, and also consider hitting that subscribe button. I got a huge project coming out about, spoiler alert, Chris Jericho. So if you can hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, I would definitely appreciate it. Thank you so much. And also follow me on Twitter or X, whatever one you want to call it. I give my daily thoughts on there. I'm always active. Follow me on Twitter as well. Thank you. Kenny Omega, who was also suspended. This would only add to the confusion, because if what he did warrants him to be suspended, why was he being rewarded with the head of the video game cover? Now, to be fair, I guess he was the head of development for the video game. But again, why was he suspended if he was somebody who was known to try to keep the peace that night? I don't know. But in hindsight, this is most likely because the future of Punk was unknown. Many critics were calling for his job, but for all we know, that would be unnecessary, as the press scrum was really his unofficial exit interview. According to Punk, he had no contact with anyone from AEW till 6 months later in March, going as far as to say he just assumed he was fired. With them removing all semblance of Punk in AEW, not even mentioning his name, and according to Punk, not even helping him find a surgeon or a physical therapist for his torn triceps injury, the writing was on the wall basically. Over time, the drama would settle down from what we could tell, but in reality, a civil war just turned into a cold war. It was a locker room divided from the least friends, who were most of the employees, such as the Young Bucks' wife, who was in charge of merchandise, Excalibur, who was head of commentary, a friend of theirs who was traveling coordinator, more on him later, by the way, and some of the rosters, such as Jack Perry, more on him, by the way. Colt Cabana, who would have a match on Dynamite seemingly just to throw a shot at CM Punk with Chris Jericho. Brandon Cutler, who would go on in the coming months to take jabs at Punk on Twitter. Also divided in this was some of Cody's trainees that he brought in, such as QT Marshall, who left AEW, Jade Cargill left AEW and is now in WWE, Ricky Starks, who all wrestling fans hopes leave AEW, and of course Punk's friends such as FTR, Darby Allin, also Jade Cargill and Tony Khan. Kind of. As the Cold War goes stagnant, both sides would take shots at each other, such as one of the Bucks mocking Punk for botching the buckshot lariat, Kenny mocking the bite, Punk making a joke about being a locker room cancer, but that made me more of a shot at Jericho. According to Punk, he would reach out to mend fences, as it was apparent that he himself was not ready to let AEW go, but advised by the other side's legal team that no contact should be had with them. Punk would direct his attention towards Dave Meltzer, who had continued to talk about him daily while spreading negative rumors about Punk. Meltzer also put out a story that Punk gave AEW a legal notice about his match with Moxley, alleging that he refused to do it. Punk would defend himself in an Instagram story explaining the issue with Moxley, where John refused, allegedly, well, not really allegedly, because John Moxley would go on to basically confirm it, where John refused to lose the match to him, as I've stated previously, and ended off the post by saying that Dave is a stooge and Chris Jericho is a liar, which is basically a way of saying that Jericho is feeding the internet blogs private info. This would be a growing theme over Punk's rehabbing process, as every time Punk was coming close to having some progress with him returning to the company, some negative stories would come out. Punk would make it obvious that he was ready to come back to wrestling, but in hindsight, hindsight, he didn't want to come back to AEW. Punk was ready to come back to WWE. On April 25th, 2023, Punk, while still under contract for AEW, would visit Monday Night Raw in Chicago, and needless to say, this was a huge deal, as this was the first time he was seen backstage at a WWE show since he walked out 9 years before. Not much came of this, but he would seem to make an attempt to mend fists with Triple H and The Miz, two people he had major heat with, speaking with both of them before being asked to leave by Vince McMahon over a phone call. Whether that was because of the contract issue or just plain disdain for Punk, we will never know, as it was rumored that Vince was against having Punk return to do the Fox show or just coming back to WWE at all. This whole debacle would of course cause people a lot of confusion. Some speculate this was a tactic to scare AEW into letting him back in, or just to get more money out of him, or maybe it was just to mess with him. In hindsight, it's 2020, but I think Punk knew for a long time that this is where he wanted to be. With it even being rumored that he pitched a match between him and, weirdly enough, close friends of the Young Bucks, Kevin Owens, who actually had a problem with Punk stemming back from their Ring of Honor days, which was 2004, 2003. I don't know. I wasn't even in school yet. According to Punk, president of WWE Nick Khan has been trying to get him back in WWE since before even Nick Khan was with the company. We're talking about before 2018. Punk would later admit that he had no desire in returning to AEW, as he didn't want to be there, and it was obvious that the Elite didn't want him there at all. Unfortunately for Punk though, Warner Bros. Discovery had already made a deal with Tony Khan and AEW to start a new show on Saturdays called AEW Collision. Tony Khan's big idea was to have a soft brand split similar to how WWE has SmackDown versus Raw. It was going to be Dynamite versus Collision, which is Now, personally, I grew up on SmackDown versus Raw, and shows with dedicated rosters will always be my preference. But when you have a roster split because there's a real life divide in your locker room, that's less than preferable. That's less than that's hustling backwards, to put it lightly. That's very much you're putting lipstick on a pig, basically. Punk would echo these sentiments, but Tony Khan, being Tony Khan, would not budge. Punk would ultimately oblige, as the show would basically be his to run and shaped in his vision, as AEW is basically meant to be from the jump. But, whatever. Punk thought this was the opportunity to help some people out. So here we are nearly a year later, and although nothing has been solved, ratings are declining, ticket sales are decreasing, and the locker room is growing more and more restless. Here we have a new show that will ultimately do nothing but somehow, some way, in true AEW fashion, make things just much worse. Sold some tickets to come see my downfall. It sold out in minutes. Saw friends in the front row. They'll leave when I'm finished. Then the lights, then my name's gone. Cause the ones who gas you up only come around when the flame's on. And I gave you my life. Hey, fuck it. So, it was announced that Collision's first episode would be held in Chicago, which basically confirms that Punk is returning. But as tickets were not selling as well as they would 2 years ago due to just the killing of this man's brand and reputation, Tony Khan would go on to have to spoil that Punk was returning. And the most telling sign of how much his reputation has been dragged through the mud, when this was announced, it was given a weirdly mixed response. This wasn't like a Cena mixed response either. It was like the fans were in a civil war as well, as it seemed the people were booing only to do so to offset the people cheering. And as crazy as it sounds, it seems like it was the same thing vice versa. People were just cheering to offset the booing.
Will feature
CM Punk.
CM Punk.
The time would come for Collision's debut, and at the time, it was amazing. Punk would return and again prove that he is one of, if not the greatest on the mic. Ultimately, he did what he planned to do with Collision. He made the show feel like it was produced by an entirely different company. As Dynamite was less story, more action, Collision was more story, less action. The beginning of the show was amazing. Although signs of Tony Khan would come out during the show sometimes, for the most part, it was everything we hoped AEW would be from the beginning. Things would not be all smooth though, as Punk would randomly take shots at Hangman Adam Page on a post-show promo.
Earlier today, I went to a local supermarket and I figured out why they call him Hangman. It's because the pegs in the toy aisle are full of Hangman action figures because nobody wants to buy them.
Oh! You son of a bitch!
He's a peg warmer. Unlike me, who moves merchandise and pops ratings and sells toys. I got everybody in AEW saying, I'm the heart, I'm the soul, I'm the spirit. Well, that's objective. What is a fact is the people who say that certainly aren't the chin of AEW, because the lights go out faster than what? GTS, go to sleep. I don't know what I'm trying to do. I got locked too. I told the House of Black no chops, and they chopped me some very mad.
Now, in defense of Punk, this was in Adam Page's hometown where he was being jeered and treated like a heel. So he decided to play that role and antagonize the hometown hero, but this was definitely a case of read the damn room, bro. Also, in defense of Punk, it was reported that he apologized to Adam via text message as he was sent away from the building Collision was being held in. It was never reported what Adam's response was to it. It was also reported that Punk denied being the reason that Adam was sent away, as Punk would make it a priority to send people away from the show who he had problems with or has been known in the past to cause problems. This would be beneficial for the show until one person, this one motherfucker, he was never supposed to be there. He slipped in the crack somehow. He slipped in the crack somehow, and he somehow got in there. If you have the luxury of not knowing who this guy is, Jack Perry is a now 27-year-old professional wrestler. Much like his friends, the Young Bucks, he was born in Los Angeles, California. At the time, most known for being one of the 4 pillars in AEW, and more importantly, being the son of the late, great Luke Perry. Jack had recently changed gimmicks, going from 5'10", 165-pound scrappy underdog to Nepo baby jerk, to put it frankly. The new gimmick seemed to be a reflection of who he was in real life, as reports have stated before. He's not the most kind person in real life, to say the least. According to reports, Jack was causing problems backstage at Collision as he was approaching a vacation and wanted to do something crazy to write himself off television. According to Punk and multiple reports, Perry wanted to break a rental car window. When he was told no, Jack apparently went off the handle. Perry would proceed to cuss out doctors, officials, and even on-screen personality and wrestling legend Tony Schiavone. The latter of the bunch would beg Punk to handle the situation with Perry. According to Punk, the conversation would be very cordial and a peaceful conversation where Punk would explain the consequences of doing such a stunt, such as injuries, creating a bad name for wrestlers with rental companies, which allegedly has happened in the past before, and the fact that Collision doesn't do TV like this. Punk would tell Perry calmly, if you want to do that shit, do it on Wednesdays. Do it on the Buck Show. Perry would seemingly agree to that. And this would be the end of that little debacle for now. Then came AEW All Out 2023, literally the biggest wrestling event to date. AEW in such a short time will hold a pay-per-view in London, England's Wembley Stadium, drawing the largest crowd in wrestling history, which is just crazy to think about. Just this company with, you know, it's such little time would fall from grace, but I'll get to that in a second. Now, the exact number of the attendance is unclear, ranging from 70,000 to 81,000, but either way, whether the haters would, no matter what the haters say, this is impressive, especially for a company only in its 4th year. Very impressive. Being such a highly anticipated event, this very well could have been AEW's last chance to turn over a new leaf, to leave the past behind them and start a new chapter. This seemed to be Punk's mindset for the weekend as well, in out of the ring, as in the ring he was facing his longtime rival Samoa Joe to put a cap on their feud that started again when I was like 3 or 4 years old in Ring of Honor. And outside the ring, Punk was making plans to bury that past, as according to reports, Punk had planned a meeting with Tony Khan and the Young Bucks to officially bury the hatchet. I've neglected to mention this, but although their relationship is in the mud now, these 3 people at one point were huge fans of each other. The Bucks, before AEW even began, saying they were practically begging Punk to join them in this endeavor.
Want CM Punk to join the Bullet Club.
Hell yeah. I'm only texting him all the time, bothering him too.
Man, anything that is good for business, I'm totally for.
That's it.
Yeah, I just man would that be crazy.
Yeah, me too.
And Punk mentioned it multiple times that it was a dream match for him and Bryan Danielson to square off with the Young Bucks. And also, in hindsight, a very interesting Instagram photo of the trio when Punk first debuted in AEW. But despite the past fascination with each other and despite Punk's efforts, allegedly, the Bucks would cancel this meeting right before it was supposed to happen. This would end up just being the beginning of Punk's horrible weekend. When Punk arrived in London, the number given to him for transportation to the stadium would bounce back, leaving him basically stranded. And it just so happened that the person who gave Punk this number, the head of transportation, was also a fan and friend of the Bucks who would be critical of Punk on Twitter. Punk would later state that this was no big deal, but would say that it was very unprofessional to do what they did, and also basically a reflection of the company as a whole. Punk would then make his way to the subway to take the train, or as our friends from across the pond call it, the Tube. I don't get it. Why it's called the Tube? Is a tube like where? Is that just slang for them? Y'all let me know. I know some of y'all be watching, so yeah, y'all give me hip. The Tube. That just sounds crazy. That just sounds a little crazy. Here at the Tube, he would ask fans for directions to get there and would even take pictures with them on the Tube. That's my last time saying the Tube, I promise. Punk didn't seem to mind and would later state that it was just like taking the train in his hometown of Chicago, where he takes the train there. Or the Tube. When Punk would arrive at the stadium, he would begin to prepare for his match with Joe, as it was the opener. While preparing for this, though, he would be watching the pre-show where the last match was wrapping up between the son of ECW legend Taz and one of my favorite wrestlers, Hook, and Jack Perry. That Jack Perry, the 5'6" Nepo baby, that guy. They were wrapping up a no DQ match, and in AEW, that basically means the performers would find new ways to trend on Twitter, which they would do this time, but not for any stunts, but for 6 words that would go on to become the most iconic phrase in AEW history. Perry and Hook would go on to do the car stunt at this event that everyone told them not to do, but before they do so, Perry would knock on the glass, look in the camera, and say,
Crushing.
Real glass.
Crushing the
Go
abdomen.
cry me a river.
Then on that same exact window that he knocked on, take a suplex on top of the windshield. Punk, noticing this, would again, like he did last year with Adam Page, walk up to Tony Khan and ask him to handle that. I did this because that's what he did. Tony Khan will respond in the worst way possible, asking Punk, what do you want me to do? Punk will respond and tell Tony, just be the boss. Like, you gotta beg your boss to be the boss. It's just insane. Punk would then say, because if he handled it, Tony Khan would not like how he handled it. Prophetic words, as Punk said. So as you can guess, Punk would have to go on and handle it himself. As Punk's match was up next, he was in gorilla position where he would confront Jack Perry about doing internet shit. After a bit of conversation back and forth, Perry would tell Punk, and get this, Perry would tell Punk, if he didn't like it, do something about it. So Punk did something about it. After this was said, Punk would push Jack Perry to create some distance like Prime Chill Sonnen, then proceed to put Perry in a chokehold until security and Samoa Joe would break things up. While being held by security, Punk would turn his attention to Tony Khan. Punk would point his finger at Tony Khan, get in his face, and tell him, this place is a joke, you're a clown, and I quit. And although Punk would say all this and walk away to his locker room, eventually they were able to calm him down and be convinced to go on with the match. According to Punk, he went through with the match for his longtime friend and opponent in the match, Samoa Joe. The referee, Paul Turner, the producer of the match, Jerry Lynn. I don't know these people, so don't feel bad if you don't know these people, but apparently they're legends in the game. And on top of all of that, he did it for the fans who, for let's be honest, they most likely were there to see CM Punk. Like, let's be honest here. Like, it's the hard truth, but let's be honest.
I went to Tony, and I was just like,
which Tony, by the way?
Tony Khan.
Okay.
And I was like, please handle that. Like, please. And he was like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, I'm not telling you what to do. Just be the boss, please. Like, I'm tired of this shit. You know? Like, I told you this was a mistake. And I told you separate shows wasn't going to work, and now we're all here, and, you know, like, please handle it. Because if you don't, you're not going to like the way I handle it.
Did he handle it?
No.
So you did?
Yes.
What happened?
Jack came back from his match. I was the next match. I'm sitting there. And I got people with me. I'm not going to say who they are. you know, because I got a lot of friends who work there, and I wish them all well, and I don't want them to be punished because they're friends with me. And I walk up to him, and I'm just like, Jack, why do you insist on doing this dumb internet shit, like, on TV? And he's just like, well, if you got a problem about it, do something about it. And I was just like, man, come on, man. You know, I would fucking kill you. Like, what are we doing, you know? And it just, you know, it's like Chael says, sometimes you just can't let you get close, you know? I thought I was doing a responsible thing, you know? I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit. Samoa Joe was there, told me to stop, and then I quit. I turned to Tony and I said, this place is a fucking joke, man. You're a clown. I quit.
At the time, news would break during Samoa Joe's entrance, and from a Punk's fan's perspective, there was a mix of emotions. I remember at first hoping it wasn't real, and then thinking it wasn't that big of a deal. Again, people in sports fight all the time. In particular, wrestling has fights all the time. Again, jealousy, anger, and dumb shit. The only problem was, again, how the fuck did this get out to the media? Not only did it get out to the media, it got out not even after the event. Punk and Joe would have the very first match of the night, and Punk couldn't even make his entrance before he was in the headlines. Some people would go on to say this ruined the night, as this would be all people would talk about from the event. I tend to disagree. I think it's all we talk about because there was nothing to talk about from the event, but then again, that's a different video for a different day. Punk and Joe would go on to have a great match. Most would say match of the night. And just a side note, if you could go back and watch Punk's entrance, he's like got a little smirk on his face. I think it's funny as hell. And now we know why he got a smirk on his face. He just cleared somebody and called his boss he just called his boss a little joke. He called him a clown, and now he's headlining that boss's show. Like, that is insane. Afterwards, Punk would learn that Perry was told to leave the building. Punk would asked if he had to leave as well and was told he was welcome to stay. However, after taking pictures with Joe and the people who worked on the match, like I said before, hanging out in the locker room and watching the show, a security guard would ask what Punk plans was for the night, and Punk, being a better guy than I am, would ask the security guard would it be easier for his job if he left, in which the security guard would say yeah. So Punk left the building and ordered Nando's. He made sure to shout out Nando's, I'm not sure why, at his hotel for some of his friends and former co-workers now, and enjoyed the rest of the night. Tony Khan would go on to do a post-media scrum where he would confirm that there was a physical altercation backstage, but refused to comment further. For me personally, this is where it started and where it ended. I didn't think it had to go further than this, nor did I think it would. By the end of the night, I was more upset about the MJF and Adam Cole main event than anything Punk had going on. Plus, this was like less than a week, or I think it was the same week Bray Wyatt had passed away. So a backstage fight was just like, do we really need to worry about that right now? Plus, Punk just got inducted in like a wrestler's Hall of Fame for helping guys out. Like it was just, like it was the same week he gets in a fight backstage with another man-child. He's being inducted into a Hall of Fame. Damn, bro, it was just so much going on. It was just like, okay, this fight, let it go. Even Samoa Joe would go on to say this was not that big of a deal, but it's not my company. This company isn't run and watched by people like me who don't care about a backstage fight. Someone had to be punished, and unfortunately, that someone was CM Punk. It would later be announced that Punk and Perry would be suspended, leading to them missing the All Out pay-per-view the next week in Punk's hometown of Chicago. This was not enough for a lot of fans and media personalities who would actually campaign for Punk to be fired, to which I had no belief it would actually happen until 5 days later on September 2nd, AEW and Tony Khan would release a statement announcing the official termination of CM Punk's contract. Yeah. It was like one of those things where it was like, they not going to actually do it, are they? It's not going to actually happen, is it? It didn't happen. It was just like, damn. These motherfuckers really dumb. This would come as a surprise, not only because AEW just released their biggest star, but they were released a statement 27 hours before a pay-per-view was going to be held in CM Punk's hometown. And even worse, 3 hours before Collision, the show that was made for CM Punk in his hometown. This would be looked at as the right move by media members in AEW, but nobody can like disagree that this was done at the worst time possible. To this day, I still have no idea why they thought it was necessary to do it that night. Like, why did you have to make that announcement this weekend while in Chicago? But I have to give Tony Khan some credit. I'm not sure if it was on purpose or not, but he would do something that would actually be sort of a chess move. Tony, before the Collision show, would actually go on air, address the crowd alone. Tony would be booed and shower with CM Punk chants. As his speech went on, though, he would go on tangents where his tone could easily be described as defensive and yet passionate. You could tell that he really did not want to fire Punk. Being such a fan of him, I'm sure it hurt him. Remember, this company was built on a prospect of Punk joining it from the jump. It was even reported that when Punk returned for the first episode of Collision, Tony Khan would start his own CM Punk chant backstage. Tony would surprisingly get the crowd on his side for the most part when he stood up from the chair he brought on the stage and stated that it was unacceptable for people to be put in danger backstage. Tony would state that he loved Chicago and this was the last place he would want to make this announcement, but it's what he felt like he had to do. Again, I still don't know why he felt like he had to do it, but the deed was done. The crowd was mixed with some booing and others cheering.
Welcome home for me.
Why did he even come out here? This was never going to end well, bro. Bro, go back. What are you doing out here? Why are you sitting down? What are you doing?
I have never done this before. I wanted to come out and talk to you before the show starts. Usually when I come out here in Chicago, in front of friends and family,
This is never going to end well for you.
I always talk about how I'm from this great state. I'm from the great state of Illinois myself. I grew up here.
Why did he do
State in Champaign.
Why did he do
And
this?
to come here to this
This
building
is never
was
going to
pretty much
end
the biggest
well.
deal in the world to me. Until I was 28 years old, I had never spent more than 2.5 weeks in a row out of Illinois in my entire life. And I love it here very much. I love bringing pro wrestling here.
I don't know why he thought this was a good idea.
5 years ago, I came. It wasn't actually in the city, as many of you remember. 5 years ago, it was out at Hoffman Estates near the streets of Woodfield. I went to the original All In. That was the biggest independent wrestling show of all time. 5 years later, last weekend, we had AEW All In. That was the biggest pro wrestling show of all time, period.
He said, period.
We sold more tickets to that show than any wrestling show in the history of the wrestling business. And now, it's very important to me to keep the tradition of All Out alive. All Out started, to be honest with you, because when I started AEW, Ring of Honor had paid for the original All In, and I couldn't call it All In without possibly getting sued by Ring of Honor, which I now own. I came here to talk to you from the bottom of my heart because today I had to do one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and sitting here right now is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
I mean, we forgive you, Tony. Or at least I do.
I don't get it. At this point, what I'm going to say,
Wait, what did he do? Why is he out here?
I'm
so confused. Oh, what?
And All Out this weekend because I really respect all of you. I'm a wrestling fan like you, and if I were in your shoes, I could totally understand.
I see him punch you on, but I get it.
But I just want to tell you, I'm out here because I had to do something I did not want to do today.
What are you talking about?
I'm very sorry to fans or anybody who's upset by it.
Hey, I believe it.
This week we
I know he didn't want to do it.
Independent of me, I have a discipline committee in AEW that is independent and it's comprised the majority of lawyers.
Such a work, bro.
And I also brought in outside legal counsel. I hired independent lawyers to investigate this and make a recommendation. This was different than anything I've ever been involved in sports or wrestling. It was very tough. When I met them, the unanimous recommendation was the action that I took. The action that I took came
imagine this is your first time hearing about him?
Oh, yeah, right? But I have to say, it stems from an incident.
Wait, what is he talking about?
Last weekend at AEW All in London. I've been going to wrestling shows like you for over 30 years, and the first one I ever went to was with my dad, who's here tonight, downstate in Champaign, Illinois. And thank you, Dad, because without him, none of this would be possible, because he took a huge leap on a dream that became AEW.
Thank you, Dad.
And that's
Thank
why
you,
we're
Dad.
here. And everything I know about business, I learned from him. He's a family businessman. This is a family business. And I care about the people who work here. That's the production staff, that's everybody that works here. The wrestlers, but also people you don't think about every day that make this show happen. I've been going to wrestling shows for over 30 years as a fan, and I've been producing them on TNT here for almost 4 years now. And this was the first time, this incident, that I have ever feared for my safety at a wrestling show, that I have ever feared for my life at a wrestling show.
Okay. All right, bro. Don't do it.
Of the people who work backstage.
I'm sure he probably did.
I'm sorry, but they don't come here. They don't work here to be put in danger. The people who work on the
what are you doing?
should not come to work and worry about, am I going to get hurt?
I'm going to Brawl Out tomorrow.
There shouldn't be 50-year-old people with artificial joints worried, am I going to get hurt for coming to work?
You're right, Tony. Now say fuck CM Punk.
I'm sorry, I can't have that. And I won't have that. And that's why I made a very tough choice. There's no place in the world. This is literally the last place in the world, literally the United Center, that I would want to tell you this. But, no. And if you want to, look. First and
Don't
foremost,
start rambling, bro.
The recommendation was from the committee, but the decision...
The committee? This is guilty conscience talking right now.
But I want you to know...
This is guilty conscience talking. This is so awkward.
Because you love professional wrestling. This company is a love letter to
tell he feels
professional
bad.
wrestling. And I know there's wrestlers here that every single one of you care about. They're all going to work very hard to put on a great episode of Collision for you here tonight. They're going to work very hard,
props to you, Tony.
to put a great all-out on for you, because we've been doing all-out here for years, and I want to keep it in Chicago forever. It means a lot. I love this town, I love this state, I love so many people here, including my family and so many of you. I love pro wrestling, I love doing this every week. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm sorry if I disappointed you. Never my intent, but I did what I had to do.
Apologizing. Stop incriminating yourself.
Thank you for being here.
What the crowd would not see was the announcement of CM Punk's termination on live television. Here, Tony Khan would make the bold claim that CM Punk incident made him fear for his life. Tony Khan would not say this when he addressed the crowd, as I think we all know this would be complete and utter nonsense. Lawyer speak, I believe some people would say it is. Tony Khan would again use the backstage employees to say that he feared for their safety as well, and would reiterate that he's been going to wrestling shows for decades and it was the first time he feared for his life. This statement would not go over well with the internet wrestling community, and to this day, a year later, Tony Khan is still being mocked for this announcement. This would not be the last mistake on this night, as one of the Young Bucks was seen taking a literal victory lap around the ring as Collision crowd was clearing out, which would end up being very poetic as it was a sign of things to come. They got what they wanted. Punk was gone and they got the company back to themselves. AEW was their company again. But what came with that was the half-empty arenas. You can celebrate, you can do your style, you can take your victory laps, but it's going to be in a half-empty arena, if that. This was the first time I felt like I wasn't crazy, and that's because it took this event for me to realize that AEW and their fans are in a bubble. The best way to put them is They're basically the vocal minority. The feeling at this time was one of disappointment, but weirdly also relief. Speaking for me personally, as a CM Punk fan, I was highly disappointed. I remember Punk debuting in AEW and the heights he took them to, from the MJF feud to the tag team match with Sting. He gave us many great moments in entertaining wrestling television that we missed out on for 7.5 years. But as a fan of Phil Brooks, the man, I was relieved it was finally over. It was obvious from me, the debut episode of Collision, that Punk was done with AEW. So I was happy that he got out of there, but it was scary. It was scary to think that I may never see CM Punk in a wrestling ring again. TNA couldn't afford him. The AEW bridge was burned. NWA had a lot of BS going on, let alone affording him was way out of the picture. The only real option for Punk to return to the ring was WWE. And there's no way that happens, right? Right? Now, I'm not excusing anything Punk did, but I will say it's something about sweets that just make you want to just let everything loose. You feel me? I'll just say they're lucky he didn't have ice cream, because this shit is amazing. Way better than seltzer water or whatever y'all drink. This point in my life was one of the lowest, but also one of the best times of my life while being a wrestling fan. On one hand, one of my favorite wrestlers had just been fired, and my other favorite had just passed away, all in about a 10-day span. On the other hand, this gave me so much inspiration to bitch and complain on the internet, thus eventually giving me the platform on YouTube I have at the moment. When Bray Wyatt passed away, I made my first video in months, as I was inspired to leave a legacy. Bray Wyatt inspired me in ways that will make him live forever, as so much of his creativity is shown through in such a short amount of time, as people will always be able to look back on his creations and notice new small details, or at the very least look at what he created and be inspired to create something of their own. And that led me to shaping my own platform. Fortunately, the thing my audience wanted though was a 3-month scavenger hunt for clues what Punk's next wrestling move would be. Looking back on it, I spent way too much time dissecting commentary and storylines in WWE. CM Punk would not help this obsession whatsoever, as he would throw subtle hints of what his plans were, such as his first appearance since being fired from AEW. Punk would be doing his side gig as a commentator for CFFC, a MMA organization with ties to UFC, which is now business partners with WWE. During these appearances, Punk and his co-commentators would make jokes such as Punk saying he was free for the next 2 months. To put this into context, in 2 months, WWE will be holding their Survivor Series pay-per-view in Punk's hometown of Chicago. There would be even teasers such as Punk's colleagues would be wearing a WWE Championship hanky in his little blazer. And also in the same night, Punk and friends would take a shot at Tony Khan in the Collision show by saying someone should let Punker book a show. Time will go on. WWE will have a few teases as well, such as having multiple wrestlers claim to be the best in the world, which was CM Punk's whole gimmick thing. It's on the back of his most famous shirt. Shinsuke Nakamura hitting the GTS, which is CM Punk's finisher move. Corey Graves, former friend of Punk, using a line from one of Punk's most infamous promos. I believe the line is the devil's greatest trick was convincing you people he didn't exist. Apparently that's from a movie though. So maybe I should take that chef's kiss away. To this day, we still don't know if these things were hinting towards Punk. It was a lot, and what came with that was a lot of gaslighting from skeptics, media members, and fans. Now, I'm not sure if those fans are Punk haters or just doubters like me who didn't want to get their hopes up like they have been for 9 years. But either way, it was a very stressful, yet fun time to be a wrestling fan. All I knew was that if Punk didn't return at Survivor Series, he wasn't returning at all. To let you know what I was thinking about at that time, that entire month I was planning on going to Chicago for the event. But when that weekend came, I was so unsure if Punk was coming, I decided to stay home. I wish I could make everyone remember how bad the WWE and Punk relationship was. And even though they may be under new management, the face of the new era is Triple H, who may have had a worse relationship with Punk than Vince did. Now, I know that sounds crazy right now, but on some wrestling shit, Punk should have been the one to retire Triple H, because I don't think John Cena is Punk's greatest rival. I don't think it's Randy Orton. I don't think it's Samoa Joe. I think it's Triple H. Real life, And if kayfabe is dead and we're bringing backstage nonsense into real life, into the show, yeah, Triple H is his biggest op. But no matter what, the day was here and it was either going to happen tonight or never. I even went a step further in saying it was either going to happen at the beginning of the show or not at all. And given the fact that Randy Orton was also supposed to return on this night, which was spoiled for us by the WWE because they didn't want the anticipation of Randy Orton being mixed up with Punk and getting the crowd's hopes up, and it didn't happen. Randy was scheduled to return during the main event where he joined the match at the end, not having to do too much due to this being his first appearance in like over a year and a half due to a career-threatening back injury. And everything went as planned. Randy returned to a thunderous ovation, did some body slams, did some hanging DDTs, and an epic RKO to win a match. This was great. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, wrestling legends is back in wrestling and is full-time, and that's amazing. But I can't lie and say that I wasn't disappointed that Punk wasn't coming back. You got to feel bad for Randy on this night as well because, again, Randy Orton is one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, and one of the most influential wrestlers of all time. And people just like, yeah, that's great. And yeah, this is nice. But we were kind of hoping for Punk. So, yeah, like it was amazing to have Randy Orton back for the first time in a year and a half. But damn, I really wanted Punk, and it kind of settled in like, yeah, I mean, what were we expecting? You know, did you really expect Randy Orton to allow somebody to overshine his return, his grand return that we've been waiting on for a year and a half? And like, did you really expect that? Did you really expect all this bad blood between Triple H and CM Punk to just be thrown to the wayside and CM Punk just trashing his company for the last 10 years? Did you really expect that? So it's like, yeah, he's never coming back to the company, but damn, like, most likely we'll never see CM Punk in a ring again.
No way! What the fuck?
Oh my God! Oh my God! This is happening!
Do you think there's ever a chance we'll see you back in a squared circle?
No.
Never?
No.
Wow.
Never, ever. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah, it happened. The company and the wrestler most synonymous with working the crowd and playing with their emotions did the unthinkable. This was Kobe and LeBron joining the same team. This was the sequel to the movie you really wanted but would never get. This was Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire. In a world where companies seem to hate acts of fan service, they did it. To put things into perspective again, I was 13 years old when Punk quit the WWE. I remember being in my last class of the day when I read the Bleacher Report article, and even then I was in disbelief. I thought it was a part of a storyline, but no. That day would begin the decade-long game of Clue that exhausted us to like no extent. Like there was again, like I can't put you in that mode of feeling like something can happen, but it never did, to the point where it's never going to happen. It's just never going to happen. When he returned, I was 23 years old. That is 9 years. That is almost 10 years. 2 months away from being 10 years to the day that this man returned. Like, all the thing that happened in my life. I graduated from high school. I dropped out of 2 different colleges. I'm a homeowner at this point. But the wait was worth it. To this day, I still can't believe I see Punk on Mondays, Tuesdays, and sometimes Fridays with a full crowd. And on top of that, it was great to see Punk somewhere where he was appreciated. I know it was in Chicago, but Punk had the crowd in the palm of his hand that night, including this guy. I wonder how it feels to be known as the CM Punk Chicago guy. Like, your life is made at that point. Like, let me have been that guy. Like, that is incredible. That guy's amazing. The love was universal. Punk's return broke the internet with not a negative tweet in sight. Fans loved it. Media members were in disbelief. And who could blame them? There was literally no confirmation or conversations until the week of the pay-per-view. The event was on Saturday. Punk and Triple H would not speak until that day on Thanksgiving 2 days before.
I always call him Triple H or Hunter. That's what it is. And then when I spoke to him, that's when the ball really got rolling, because it was a very I asked him if he wanted to talk on the phone, and he said, no, I would actually rather I would just like to FaceTime you so I could see you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, and we just talked about a whole lot of stuff, and about, stuff that was at one point serious to probably both of us that is like silly now. And we just kind of laughed, buried a hatchet. And then we started talking business. And I was like, man, this is like Thanksgiving. I don't want to bother you. You're with your girls. Like, we can talk about it later. But then I was just like, oh, well, Friday, and then the show's Saturday. It all got done very, very fast. My lawyer was not stoked to be working OT on Thanksgiving.
Where apparently they buried the decade-long hatchet leading to Punk coming into the arena mid-show and signing his contract before going out like he would 12 years ago at Money in the Bank 2011.
I'm driving to the building, and I don't have a deal yet. And I call my lawyer and I go, I'm gonna drive to the building just in case. Okay. Just keep working on it.
That's nuts.
Oh, it's insane.
That's nuts.
It's insane.
How long's that drive from the crib to the
case? I mean, depending on traffic, but at that time of year, no construction, so I think I got there pretty quick. 20 minutes maybe.
Okay, man.
Yeah. Man, I'm stressed out leaving the house. You know what I mean? My wife's like, I'm so excited for you. She's like, just put this white T-shirt on.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I was probably wearing this. I don't know. Get to the building. Security comes out, hands me black sweatpants, hoodie. And he goes, sit in your car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all right. So here, hoodie up. And the truck next to me, because we have pictures of superstars on all the 18-wheelers and the TV trucks and stuff like that. And I'm parked right next to the TV truck. And it's just Steve Austin's head looking at me the whole time. So I'm just like, take a picture, sent it to Steve.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He hit me back with the WTF, kid.
First of all, that's amazing. That's sick. Come on.
Yeah. Oh my God. And I just sit there, I'm literally just like sitting
by yourself in the car.
By myself in the car. I'm listening to the Clash and the Ramones. I'm trying to center myself.
Yeah.
Trying to think about, like 8-year-old me.
In through the nose, out through the mouth.
Like this is just, just literally trying to be in the moment. If this happens, because it still wasn't a guarantee. Like, if this happens.
There was no contract. Punk didn't even know if it was going to happen. And I'll play the interview, but Punk thought maybe he should just turn around and go home.
Was there ever a chance, though, really, that you might be like, nah, I'm peeling out and leaving?
Me, personally, I mean, there could have been if there was like some hard nose to some things in the, the contracts. But again, I think both sides were eager.
They wanted it.
You know what I mean? But then you get lawyers involved, and then it's a lot. It's a lot. But I get a text. And it's just like, okay, we're going to clear the hallway, and we're going to come get you, and we're just going to put you in Triple H's office. I'm like, okay. So I run through the building. So, like, maybe.
Hoodie on, and you wrapped up like Michael Jackson's son.
Yep. They put me in the freight elevator. And it's funny because I know the building like the back of my hand. I'm like, the stairs are right around the corner. Yeah. I could just walk down the stairs. They put me in the freight elevator.
Yeah.
Freight elevator lowers. I hear him on the other side of the elevator, they're screaming and yelling, clear the hallway. And I'm like, oh no. I'm that guy now. All the boys are going to be like, this is still, why do we have to, but they clear the hallway and the freight elevator door opens up and hit like 6 steps this way is the door I'm walking into. And I walk in there and I just sit down and then I'm just in there and they're starting the War Games match. Right. So it's literally like, I don't have a deal yet,
We're at the end of the show.
Yeah. So I'm just sitting in there and the lawyers are going back and forth, hammering stuff out. And Triple H walks in and he's just like, if this gets done, we're just going to wait. When the time's right, we're going to bring you in through Gorilla. And I was like, okay, great. So contracts get executed and it's time. And it's literally just like, okay, deep breath, open the door, walk through Gorilla. And now there's so many people in Gorilla.
Yeah. Can I ask you, who was the first person you saw? Like, do you remember the first person you made eye contact with and they were like, what the?
Yeah, right.
Because I got brought into Gorilla, and I don't think people knew. I think people were just piled in there because it's the end of the show and there's social media people who are going to be filming, winners and losers coming through the curtain and they're doing their job and stuff like that. And I remember being in a Gorilla. And then all of a sudden I get bear hugged from behind. And like, as I kind of turn around to see who it is, it's Bailey.
Standard Bailey.
And she's like, I knew it. She's like, as soon as they started yelling at us to clear the hallway, she's like, I knew it. Yeah. And she's not letting go of me. And then the Triple H is there,
It's like Bailey, let him go.
No.
Stephanie. I remember seeing and having a moment with, there's somebody I haven't seen in 10 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's somebody that, people are like, oh, they hate each other. Regal, I remember looking at Regal and Regal going,
Damn, look at us.
Like that Paul Rudd video. Look at us. Look at us. Look at us.
100%. But there was just so many people in there. It was like, and then I don't know what to do. I absolutely lose my composure.
Yeah.
Because all I know is I'm coming out.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the set looks like. I don't know if there's a ramp. I'm literally like in the dark,
walking in blind.
And so I'm trying to talk to Triple H over the table, and it's so loud and there's so many people and they like hit my music and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Look cool.
And he's like, go out and walk down to the cage. And I'm like, go out and walk all the way down to the cage.
That's crazy.
And he was trying to tell me that there was 2 cages for the baby faces and the heels for the War Games. Yeah. And he wanted me to walk down and stand in between there. And in my head, I'm like, I'm marching all the way to the cage.
Yeah, right.
And he's like, no, my music's playing.
Yeah.
And like, we're going back and forth. And I'm like, we're both freaking out. We're like, no. And like, he rips his headset off. And I'm like, oh God, what are we doing? And we figured it out. But
that's amazing. I'll never look at that the same
way. Yeah, the chaos backstage, brother. I mean, it's the last minute.
Someone's got to have this on film too.
There was so much stuff going on back there, and they film everything now. So I'm sure someday we're going to see a lot of cool stuff.
Your next.
It was just such a great moment, and I love that chaos and that uncertainty again. I was like, man, I could just drink it up all day. But when the music hit, it was deafening.
Yeah,
I was like, oh man.
And according to Punk, all the hints on WWE television, that had him questioning himself. Like, he was wondering if he should be tanning and getting in the gym or not. According to Punk, it was so close to Survivor Series and it was so close to not happening that Nick Khan, president of WWE, would say, let's just aim for Royal Rumble 2 months later. But Punk, like me, knew it had to be that night and it had to be that city. He didn't want to give up leverage. He knew it had to be that night. Not only would this man return to the company he vowed to never show up to again, but he overshadowed Randy Orton. Like, I cannot, even if you aren't a wrestling fan, you know who Randy Orton is. Randy Orton is one of the most popular celebrities, athletes, wrestlers in the world. And CM Punk overshadowed him. This is somebody, in all due respect to Randy Orton, but Randy Orton was given the keys from day one. Punk had to leave to earn that stardom. This really shows the growth in not only CM Punk, but really in Randy Orton, because Randy Orton 12 to 13 years ago was not be going for that shit. Randy Orton 12 to 13 years ago, nah. But this is a grown Randy Orton. This is a grown CM Punk. Like, they would even have a meeting and watch one of the best WrestleMania matches ever. They would watch it together and just show, like, just see the growth in these two guys. It's just, again, I was watching these guys when I was 10, 11, hell, 7, 8 years old. And now I'm 23, 24. And just seeing these guys be the old heads now is just amazing to me. Again, 12 to 13 years ago, Randy Orton wouldn't allow CM Punk to overshadow his moment like that. And not only that, WWE wouldn't have allowed it. But Punk did that. Punk did it. Punk did it, and Punk and Randy Orton even shared a moment across the arena. Punk, for the first time, other than the videos and pictures I've seen of him with his wife and dog Larry, looked like he was at peace. This was the first time in my life I saw Punk look like he had his guard down in the wrestling environment. Punk, from the beginning of his career, was always chasing something. He always had a chip on his shoulder, for better or for worse. Even in AEW, in hindsight, from the beginning, from the jump, Punk did not look like someone who was happy to be there. He looked like somebody who was motivated to prove himself to someone. Who that someone is, I'm not sure. But this reflected in his first promo where, in the beginning, he took shots at WWE. Punk wouldn't mention AEW or take shots at them for months, which would weirdly upset fans who thought WWE was taming him, which would just go on to prove that there was nothing Punk could do to make everyone happy. But what would really matter was that he was happy. Unfortunately for Punk, as you guys know by now, the good times would come to a sudden halt when, in his first televised match, Punk would suffer the same exact injury he suffered in AEW on the other arm. And I was there in terrible seats, and I could barely see anything that night, but I did see that. That is the one thing I saw. I seen him favoring his arm as soon as he took the move. I thought it was a weird thing to grab your arm on a DDT, and I knew something was wrong. Just like with the foot injury, just like with the triceps injury. I just know it. I just know my guy. Punk would go on to finish the match, giving me a little hope he wasn't too hurt. But Punk not posting on Instagram, fan pics with him holding his arm awkwardly. And 2 days later, WWE would make the announcement that Punk would be opening the show with an announcement. So I kind of already knew what it was. And then later on that show, he would announce on Monday Night Raw that he indeed tore his tricep, which would mean he would miss WrestleMania, where he would most likely accomplish his goal of main eventing WrestleMania for the first time in his career. Unfortunately, he would have to wait for that. But what wouldn't wait is the beginning of the feud of the year, where Drew McIntyre, who was eliminated by Punk in the Royal Rumble, would attack Punk, starting the feud, which would give Punk a role as special guest commentator for Drew's match versus Seth Rollins, which ironically was the match that was scheduled for Punk. Punk would attack Drew after he won the World Heavyweight Championship, causing him to lose the title 5 minutes later to Damian Priest when he cashed in the Money in the Bank, which ironically Punk is most famous for. Like, when you think about the Money in the Bank, you think about Punk. So it was real, like, poetic. This was another amazing moment, proving Punk as a valuable asset to any company, whether he's wrestling or not. This would not be the end of Punk's night, as he would come out during the main event to celebrate with Cody Rhodes in his crowning moment, which was, again, a very poetic moment, as these two were guys who 3 years ago were hugging an AEW ring, going through hell and back just to be at the top of the mountain where we never thought we'd see them again, who, again, were really like if there's no Cody Rhodes and if there's no CM Punk, if WWE treats these guys like they're being treated right now, there is no AEW. There is no Tony Khan in wrestling business. There is no Young Bucks on A&E or whatever, not A&E, TNT. There is no Young Bucks on TNT. There is no Kenny Omega on the big stage. Like, CM Punk and Cody Rhodes are the catalyst for AEW even existing whatsoever. And here they are, hugging and kissing on the biggest stage in WWE history, WrestleMania 40. The irony of it is just, you can't you can't write stories this ironic. This capped off a beautiful weekend for Punk, which started with him celebrating the man who gave him the tools to be here in the first place, Paul Heyman, as he was taking his rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame. Punk would sit front row right next to his best friend's kids. None of this would have seemed possible without the drama that Punk and AEW went through, and everyone was just happy it was over. Punk had all these legendary moments and reunions that were decades in the making. AEW was getting more ridiculous than ever, doing everything they wanted to, more than ever. Drinking blood, jumping from ladders on the glass, stapling each other with staple guns, bad comedy skits, and something about a devil, which I'm not too proud to admit I was a fan of at first. But no matter what you thought about the television, the quality of television will always be reflected in the numbers, whether that's ticket sales, ratings, merch, and AEW's numbers were plummeting. Ratings-wise, merch-wise, ticket sales-wise, every metric. Whether that was because Punk leaving, Cody leaving, injuries to stars, or just bad television, things were getting dire for AEW, and at the worst time possible as well, as AEW was approaching their final year of their media rights deal with Warner Bros. Discovery. And in business, it's unfortunately a what have you done for me lately type of environment. So AEW was desperate, and we all know desperate times calls for desperate measures. And AEW would do something no other wrestling company would be able to do for a very long time. They would overshadow WWE during WrestleMania weekend.